So welcome, I'm Annette Matas-Duran. I know many of you and work with some of you regularly. Those of you that don't know me, I work in the Global Education Office and I work with faculty-led programs, so groups of students. So even if they're led by students or by staff. And so since 2013 I've been in this role, and one of the things that people have expressed is just the frustration of figuring out how to make payments with international vendors, how to collect money from students. And so we thought we'd put together a nice workshop series. I wanted to start first by telling you what we're going to talk about, and then we'll go through each person. So today we're going to talk about creating a budget in general. So budget specifics, things to consider when you're creating the budget, and a timeline. So this piece, usually the faculty member leading the program is working on this piece with the help of myself or administrators. Then we'll talk about the actual process of collecting program fees from participants. There's a few methods that you can use to do that. And we'll talk about making payments to international vendors, whether that be using POs or P-cards, paying things before you leave, as well as faculty paying for things while they're out there. And then we'll go over another method, a pay-as-you-go method. So it's a full agenda. I will be doing my best to keep time, just so that we make sure we get a little bit of all of this information. And if there's questions after, we can address those and also answer some questions via email. So let's go on ahead and do some intros of the panelists. I have their information here, but can you please just tell us your name, your department, the program you facilitate if you do, and where that country is. Your title would be helpful as well.
I'm Mike Gonzalez. I'm a lecturer too in the Department of Civil Engineering. We changed our name recently to Better Fit Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering. This is going to be my fourth study abroad program. This past summer I led part of the course in Germany, 1 week in Berlin, 1 week in Munich, and then my colleague also offered a second course back-to-back in the Netherlands, 1 week in Amsterdam, 1 week in Rotterdam.
I'm Christine Sauer. I'm back as Acting Associate Director of International Studies, and I'm in Economics as my home department. Through International Studies, we have run the Schloss Diek program in Germany for 11 summers now. It's a quasi-platform program that usually brings 2 faculty members from different colleges with 2 courses that all of our students have to take at the same time. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've run it as a second half spring course with class meetings at UNM before we go, usually 5 Saturdays, and then 3 weeks in country that are more of the experiential learning. I've also served on the Study Abroad Allocations Committee for many years, chairing it for the last 2, so I can also talk about that a little bit in terms of timeline.
Loyola Chastain International Studies Institute. I work with Christine on the Schloss Diek program. I'm the admin assistant for the program.
I'm Vicki Madrid Nelson. I'm an associate director at the Latin American and Iberian Institute. And as an interdisciplinary program, we actually work across campus with various departments and programs. We often have supplemental funding that goes to the faculty leader, and so by virtue of that, we have a hand in the accounting and the processing of payments.
My name is Cara Camp. I'm with the Provost Fiscal Shared Services Center. We oversee multiple units across campus as far as their fiscal oversight and assist with payment processing, account reconciliation, program assistance, a variety of fiscal efforts. Our portfolio ranges from the College of Fine Arts, Architecture and Planning, to the College of Education, and currently athletics.
Wonderful, thank you for the introductions. All right, so we're going to go on ahead and get started with Dr. Sauer. She's going to talk about her program, a little bit about her program for some background. It's hard to talk about a budget when you don't know what that looks like. So a quick overview, and then delve in deeper into the first part, which is creating the budget, budget specifics, and the timeline.
Okay, maybe I'll start with the timeline because that's partially driven by other deadlines that exist on campus, most notably the deadline for the study abroad allocations proposals, which this year are due October 17th. And having done this multiple years, there are certain things that I know how they work because we're always in the same home base, which is this castle near Düsseldorf, Germany, and then there are just different field trips that we do. And I'm also a native of Germany, so I'm also familiar with distances that we can reasonably travel for field trips, what the approximate expenses are for meals and hotels and so forth. But basically, that starts at the beginning of the fall semester when we plan this for the following spring. So if you go earlier in the year, let's say you have a spring break trip planned, you actually want to start doing that over the summer probably. We try and get our student recruiting up into gear no later than International Education Week, which is when GEO hosts a study abroad fair where a lot of students come around, and you'll probably collect a lot of names, not a lot of which materialize into actual applicants. So the earlier the better you can get your students to commit. We do that with an initial deposit, which is usually quite substantial part of the program fee. We've done it as early as, Lisa, remind me, was it December when you ran the program? Last year was in early January, right after students came back. We make a portion of that initial deposit a non-refundable application fee. So in our case, last year the program fee ended up being $1,500. The deposit was $1,000, $150 of which was non-refundable. And Loyola will talk about how the students actually make that payment. We don't handle the money. It goes into an account at the cashier's office. We then transfer the monies into our index from which we pay all of the local bills like printing of program flyers. Our banner and foundation tax comes out of that. Faculty travel is reimbursed out of that. But the bulk of it is the one big bill that we pay to our German partners. So we only have one foreign vendor that we deal with. They make a lot of the local arrangements. They prepay all of our in-country bills, then present us with a final bill. Budget template that the Study Abroad Allocations Committee put together maybe a couple of years ago. And I just sort of used some of our numbers from the last year that were in the original proposal. I don't remember off the top of my head whether that was okay. So the way this is set up is they distinguish student expenses, faculty expenses, and program expenses. The SAC, the Study Abroad Allocations Committee, will only fund, will not directly fund to help students offset their fees or their expenses. Of course, indirectly they do, because the program will provide funding for fixed program expenses, such as group travels, group meals, guided tours, what have you, facilities rental in the foreign country, and then some certain faculty expenses, but not including faculty salary. So one thing that we have required from our participating faculty members' home departments is that they provide some support. So what I actually do with our budget initially is a little bit more detailed than that, because it's sort of set up in the way that we will set up the invoice that comes from our vendor. So we have different categories. Obviously, most of the first component, faculty, workshops, administration, and so forth, include US-based expenses as well as foreign-based expenses. So we have things like faculty salaries, faculty travel. Now all the faculty have to have this mandatory travel and health insurance. We didn't happen to have any guest lectures last year, but we pay rental fees at the castle where we stay and a small stipend for our local coordinator. The foundation that gets paid by wire transfer also gets charged a fee for the wire transfers that they receive. there's our advertising print material, there's the best estimate that we can come up with of our banner tax and foundation tax. And then sort of categories of what we pay at our home base. We always take out a group insurance for the students and the faculty, just general liability. There's rooms and meals where we stay. Some other expenses, they happen to do laundry for us while we're there, but they charge. Then there's local excursions, some of which include group meals. And then the big trips that we take, so we transport everybody by rental van, so we factor in the rental van charge, gasoline, parking. Occasionally there is a speeding ticket that we've had to pay. In some big cities we use public transportation, and then the students and faculty stay in hotels. So, you notice that I set my budget up specifically in dollar and euro amounts, so that way I can play through different scenarios for what the exchange rate variation might be. At the bottom, let's see, go to total expenses. So if you see under total expenses, it adds up to different categories. Because we're paying a vendor who is a not-for-profit authority, they will charge us a value-added tax, but it's lower than the customary 19% that we otherwise would have to pay in Germany. And then there's just all the adding up of the euro and dollar components to figure out what our total amount owed is going to be when we convert it at different exchange rates. Okay, and I use that sort of as my baseline to figure out one, what to charge the students, and secondly, also what the request is going to be to the SAC. And I think maybe I should leave it here so that we stay on time.
All right.
And I'll be happy to answer more specific questions later.
Okay. So this slides right into our next spot. So basically, you're working on your budget, getting things set up for figuring out how much students are going to need to pay for their program, right? So then we're going to go into collecting payments from students. So there has been some changes to this. I just want to note, those of you who are veterans and have been collecting program fees from your students by check or cash in your department, we're no longer going to be able to do that. So we're going to be offering a solution in which this program has already been doing, and actually, admin, this is going to make your life easier. So we are passing out some templates for you, and I'll pass it out as Loyola gets started. But the first question I had for Loyola was just, how does your department collect program fees from participants?
Okay, so what we do initially is once the students have been selected to be in the program, we have a template letter that we generate and send out to them. And in this letter, we say that we tell them what their initial deposit is going to be, and that they have to pay this by a certain date. In this case, it was December 19th, no later than January 5th. And it also indicates there's a non-refundable deposit of $150. And then it goes on to say, please pay in person at the cashier's office at the UNM Business Center. We give them the address. You must pay by check or cash. The cashier's office will not accept credit cards. Be sure to tell the cashier that you're paying for the account Schloss Deke, detail code C205. And that's all outlined in here. Now, what's interesting is the form that she's handing out now will have that information. So a student can now have a form with that, but we have always put it in the letter. What happens, the student goes down then to the cashier's office, they give them this information, and they make their deposit. We also tell them in here, please submit a copy of your receipt to the ISSE Administrative Assistant Loyola Chastain within a day after you've made the payment. They can either bring that receipt, because the cashier's office gives them 2 receipts. So they can either bring me their receipt, or they can scan it and email it to me. And then I just keep a running total of everything that's coming in, and there's also a report in my reports where you can go and look up your general ledger account to see how much money is in there, who's paid, etc. But I keep that separate. I just keep a running total and check it against that report, and I'm usually right on with that. But that's how the students pay. I collect no money. They go down there, I collect receipts. And it's a beautiful, clean way to do it.
Carol, will you please talk about the first sheet, which was one that she mentioned that is now a template? They had been doing it through the bursar's office, like you said, but the sheet is new.
Right, we didn't have anything other than the letters.
Is there anything that you'd like to add about the very first sheet that's on top for everybody's packet?
Yeah, so what you mentioned, they have a detail code through the bursar's office set up. If you don't have any of that set up, this is just kind of an easy flyer that you can manipulate to whatever program you like. It has just basic details. I've got Louis Lobo on there, but you can make this fun and put a picture of the last group that went, etc. It gives the program name, the dates of the travel, the sponsoring department. I will say that you're going to want to get, if your program is kind of spread across multiple departments, whoever's administrating your department, you should really put that information there, or administrating your program. The direct department contact, so if the bursar's office has questions regarding a deposit or what the student is trying to do, they have an individual they can contact. The department index and account code. This is really where all of your expenditures and revenues will post. And again, you'll get that from your department contact or the sponsoring department if you've got a specific program index. Now what Loyola was mentioning is they've got it set up on a general ledger account that's a little bit different from what this will do. This will just deposit it right into the index. So accountants out there can pull those net reports pretty easily. You're going to have your deposit amount, whatever that may be. You may have two forms for the initial deposit and then another form for the remaining amount with a to be determined final payment amount. Then you've got the deposit type. I put that on there because normally the bursar's office likes to identify how an individual is paying, and this is kind of their backup documentation when they go in. And then of course the student name and banner ID. I understand that there are some programs that allow participants, which are not UNM related, to travel with their programs. So in that case, that would just have to be a specific identifier for you guys outside of the student or the participant's name. And then also, you can request the bursars send a copy of the receipt to you also. They're able to duplicate and email that to whoever your department contact is, whether that's yourself or the PI or whoever. So this is just kind of simple, and this can be modified as you guys need. It was just kind of put together as something simple to give to your students and make it easy to go down to the cashier's office.
So for those of you, everybody here uses the Teradata study abroad system for health and safety management, right? But what we've been doing for some departments, and if you're interested, of course, is doing the entire application process, or if not, at least in the post-decision materials with your health and safety materials, we can add in this information so that way students can go, they can download the form, take it over, upload their receipt, and then your department can log in and see it if you'd like, right? So that's an option. We can try to streamline this even further if you'd like. Kara, would you also talk about briefly the checklist that we started to create?
Yeah, I apologize. This is very, very basic. This just has some key indicators on it. Again, just program name, dates of travel. This is going to be utilized by whoever is the admin for this program. So I didn't put that information to be filled out. Again, sponsoring department approval, that's going to be critical because your time is going to be taken away from normal duties to assist with this program, and that may be part of your duties, but just having that in writing or in an email is just always good to have. The index for program revenues and expenses. Some individuals have a generalized index that they use for these types of programs. Some have specific indices for specific programs. And just having knowledge of that and having this kind of as an easy access is good. If your department doesn't have an index readily available, then my department and whatever financial administration you go through, whether that be us or if you go through the College of Arts and Sciences, Mark Madalini, we can definitely help you with any of the FOCA elements that you'll need to set up that index. The list of the study abroad students, again, you may not know that when you're, obviously when your program's beginning, but having that on file is also good. What your deposit due date is gonna be, the amount, creating the bursar's office flyer, having a revenue reconciliation completion date, being able to supply that if you were ever audited, or if any of your program administrators would like to see that information. The same thing with the remaining amount, and then remaining funding and revenue reconciliation upon the completion of your program. Being able to provide that to your program director regarding what balances can be carried forward for the next program, etc. This isn't all-inclusive, and you may have specific items for your program. This is easily, again, modified to fit what you guys are needing.
When one of the reasons that we created this, were admin were reaching out and saying, I don't know what's going on with the program, so the hope is that, this will help faculty, admin, our office, everybody communicate a little easier. Thank you.
Yeah, and another item also is that, and sorry, I'm gonna go back to the cashier's flyer for just a second. This does not include credit cards, and I apologize that the credit card option is on this. If you do wanna set up a TouchNet to make it easily payable online through a credit card, we can assist you with that also. That's set up through the bursar's office through TouchNet. So if that's an option you guys would like to.
I would like to piggyback off of TouchNet. So we do have programs that use TouchNet. For example, the law school does. And so if after your department sets up the TouchNet account, if you would like, we can add that link right into their health and safety materials in the system. Then they log in, they click it, they pay with their card, and then it'll automatically check off because it's connected. So since TouchNet's a university system, and so is our study abroad system, it integrates. So nothing needs to happen. They pay it, it's checked off, then we can all see that it's paid. But the process of getting the TouchNet, that might take some time. Also, I know there is some kind of fee, like a percentage fee. I don't know what that is, and unfortunately I couldn't get that information in time for this meeting today. So when I get a response, I'll let you know what that is. But that's something to consider in your budget if you do use TouchNet. Loyola, will you talk a little bit about the reconciliation process? So let's say then that students have made their payments to the bursar's office, and now the department needs to reconcile that.
Right, so you have a form in your packet. This is my actual reconciliation sheet. Every month, okay, I'm gonna back up a little bit to my index for this, for my deposits. It's only a revenue account. I don't charge any expenses to it because I get asked every month from Mila Cooper down in accounting for my report. So I have to, as you see here, I put the name of the student. In the top here's the descriptor of the account. Then we have the name, student ID, the amount that we received, the date that it was received, and this is all, I get all of this off of their receipt. And then we have rows for date deposit refunded, amount refunded. Because we do have refunds, sometimes students can't go. As Christine said, we keep $150 of the application fee. And in this case, we had 2 students last year who didn't go, so we refunded that. And then at the bottom, you see where I transfer the money then into my expense account. And so I move all the money once we get all the money in. And then we got a couple of deposits late this year, so I moved that. But all of this has to show. So I just keep this running as a student comes in or I receive a receipt. I put their name, banner ID, and I put the deposit and everything. I just keep it running all the time. And then when they ask for my report, it's ready to go. I don't have to do it at the time. It's just ready to go. And but you are asked for this every month until you have a zero balance in that GL account, that general ledger account. So I don't know how that works other than I know we had to have a general ledger account. I stepped into the program after all of this was set up, so I'm just following what we normally do. But that's the reconciliation process.
And Alright, and in this section, we only have about 2 more minutes, but there is one thing before we pass it to Vicky about how does your department make payments for program logistics? So that will transition. So once you
Sure.
have the money in the account, how does that look? Do you
Well,
use-
once Christine has the bill from Schloss-Diek, then I generate a purchase order. And normally Schloss-Diek likes a deposit of about 20 or 25,000 euros. It depends on what they want that particular year. And they want it in euros, so I'll generate a PO for the whole amount. And, but I will do special handling, ask them for a wire transfer, and they have all the information. And so we'll make an initial deposit around April. And it's, like I said, the accounting office does it in a wire transfer, and so I don't have to do any kind of reconciliation with that until the end, when we get the final bill from Schloss-Diek, and we usually don't get that till September, October, somewhere in there is when all of the final expenses are figured out. And then I will make that final payment and adjust the PO at the end to zero it out, because most of the time it's a little less than what I did the initial PO for.
So you use one vendor.
One vendor.
Some people use multiple vendors, right? That's something to consider. Will you talk a little bit about, I'm sure you have to get flights for faculty, right? And some other kinds of expenses. Is that done by you with your P card? Is that done by faculty or their P card?
Well,
Start there.
generally, I mean, I'm willing to buy the travel with P card, but I've generally we've generally had faculty that will get online, find a cheap ticket and buy it, and then I'll just reimburse them after the fact, usually when they return.
So I'm going to pull up, alright, so this will transition a bit more now to Vicki Nelson from LAII. She has worked with multiple programs that, some pay more vendors, some pay less, but one thing that a lot of you have had questions about are P cards and P cards for faculty and study abroad specifically. So can you talk a little bit about, talk about your experience making payments and into P cards.
So I want to start with the purchase order, because while it may seem on the front end like more work rather than just putting your credit card out there, it in fact has a lot of safety net built in there. So on the front end, it is a little bit more work. First of all, you have to make sure that your provider or your vendor is registered in the UNM system. So they have to be a registered vendor with a UNM banner ID number. And in order to do that, it usually just takes a W8BEN form. Once they've completed that, in the system, you're able to go into Lobomart, do a vendor maintenance record, and set them up in the system. Once they're in there, then your next step is, in fact, to build off that budget, request a quote, because purchasing has a two-step process. First, you need a quote, and then when you're ready to pay, they will send you an invoice. And often, your quote and your invoice will be right on the penny. Sometimes there's variation once your actual costs are coming in. So at quote stage, that's when you're able to put in your estimates. Some vendors will want a lot of detail. Others may just want categories. But to have that spreadsheet behind the scenes is very helpful, so that you're able to tie the amount that's in a quote to a detailed explanation of what that amount consists of. But once you've done that and your vendor is registered, you have your quote, then you're able to go into Lobomart and request a purchase order. And much of what goes into that purchase order is determined by your vendor or whatever entity it is that you're working with in the country. But having done that, then the next level, whatever can't be taken care of with a purchase order because perhaps your vendor is not set up with the ability to receive a wire transfer, they're not set up with maybe, it may not be an actual business or institution that financially is able to meet the requirements of a vendor. So if that's the case, then you're going to be looking at P cards and study abroad P cards. So I like to go sort of in this level. So there's PO first, then you go to a P card. The P card, the burden is much more on the administrator here to purchase in advance. So you would be maybe paying the hotel for the group. If that hotel has a site that you can go in, reserve the rooms in a block, have a definite amount, and pay with a P card. Or you may be able to pay some of the transportation if it's a commercial bus company that you're able to pay ahead of time. So you would be using a P card but paying from here in advance. Then you're up to a study abroad P card. And I think this is where most of the complexity comes in. As a faculty member or a faculty leader, you would be going through the training to obtain a study abroad P card. That training is pretty fast and you get through it, you sign the P card agreement, and you do the application, and lo and behold, you have a card. And with that card, you are able to pay expenses for your program. The catch is, those expenses most often are expenses paid in the field. The nice thing about the Study Abroad P card is that you do not have to request special exception for expenses that one might normally have to request exception for on a regular P card, which is nice. However, the main thing to remember is that the only expenses that can be put on that Study Abroad P card are directly related expenses for the Study Abroad program. But the Study Abroad P card assumes that you are going to be dealing with entities that can accept a credit card. There again, at least in our experience, very often that's not the case because our groups are going to remote areas where there may not even be internet. They're dealing with host families perhaps rather than an actual business. And so in those cases, a credit card does not work. And so the other nice thing about the Study Abroad P card is that the faculty leader is able to do cash advances on that credit card, which is great because it facilitates so many things. And even, I think one of my favorite examples is when the group is going to have a meal at a restaurant. Maybe that restaurant, I'm thinking to Cuba, we couldn't pay with a credit card. And so we were paying in cash and still obtaining a receipt and still able to document the individuals that participated in that meal, you know, where that meal was done. We would have a receipt for what we paid, but cash was the only way to work. Now, as you're going, or as the faculty leader is going through the training, it will explain the limitations and the restrictions on cash advances. So just to sum up, purchase order, you can do early on in advance, hopefully for the bulk of your expenses for the program. Again, if your vendor can get registered, do the WABEN, send you a quote, and then there's an invoice process. The second level is what the department administrator can do with a P card here to purchase and facilitate many of those program costs, payment, the transactions for those costs. The third thing would be the Study Abroad P card that the faculty leader can use on site in those areas or with those vendors that will accept a credit card. And finally, the cash advance, which would be when everything else is not an option, then the cash advance. And there are, I want to reiterate, there are limitations and restrictions even on the amount, the maximum amount that can be withdrawn as cash for each time. So you'll want to make sure that you understand what all of those requirements are.
So this last model is a really unique model. I asked Michael to come because his model looks different. So they do a pay-as-you-go model, so there's no money touched by the faculty leader or the department. So it's a very unique way to do it.
I'm Mike Gonzalez, and one of the advantages that we have is we want to go to different sites and different locations through cities. And the most important feature is that we want the students to learn how to do this on their own, where we provide a lot of guidance. Right now, we're going to go into the recruiting phase to try to get our 15 minimum for students for each of the 2 courses. So there's 6 credit hours in our program, 1 month, happens every June, and we've been pretty successful. And we want to even expand it. School of Engineering, we're the only program doing it. There's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of opportunity for recruiting and pairing up with School of Architecture. We've done that in the past, and I think that we can carry it forward. But the main part that I really want to convey is that if we're not touching money, but we're teaching students how to manage your program and how to be successful, is really defining what they're going to get out of it. One, we break it down and really identify some of the possible expenses, and being early rather than late is going to help them, utilize their money a lot better. The actual course expense, that's what we do. We say during the course, you're going to be spending about this much, and it's all based on breaking it down. So typically a hostel is going to cost them about $55 a night, and the options for them are a manyfold. One is that they can cost share, they can go in groups, travel buddies. We highly recommend that. We show them how to do that. They travel together, they're funding, now they're pulling their money and staying at an Airbnb flat, which is pretty nice. So now they've got about, 4 people, that's well over $200 a night. They love it. Some people travel with their spouses. This is a course, but their evenings, they want to be with their spouse, mini vacation. The option is, hey, you're going to be doing this, that's separate. So you're not part of the quote-unquote travel group, but you're there for the course. And some students just want to be alone. They want to stay at the cheapest place they can find, which is those hostels. So all depends on what you want to do. Food, and we just say lunch. You're going to spend roughly 20 bucks a day, plus or minus, that's, your expense. So then the actual travel, the metro, what type of metro cards, public transportation, and traveling between cities, Eurail, flying Ryanair, because it's a lot cheaper. And then the museum fees. So roughly it's about $2,900, just under that, and we've been on target on budget for the locations. So we break it down in a very good way. So our students obviously have lecture on site, different locations, very impactful locations, historical, based on transportation issues. They absolutely love it. Technology museums, one that I need to switch off. They didn't like the going out to Salzburg, so we're probably gonna fit in the BMW museum, There's a BMW museum that everybody really wanted to go to.
And so they take each museum as they enter.
As they go, or if you have to do a transportation like Salzburg or Neuschwanstein Castle and Linderhof, we typically we've learned that we can get students to travel there, but then time is an issue. It's based on where they're hubbed at. So we like them to, quote unquote, and I give them sites and everything else, is purchase a bus tour ticket. So they go with a bus tour, we're all together, we get there, we go do our own thing, the lecture, the understanding, the impact, and then we stay with that guided bus tour. And the students had a blast doing that at one of the locations, but not the other. So it's a part of your experiences. So each of the different programs have different site locations and how to get there, what the objectives are, where we meet, where we wind up. We do a lot of walking. The budget is fully located out at each of those locations. And I break it based on 15 and 20 at each of the sites. So we just pretty much tally up, that's where the numbers come from, at each of the specific locations, and let me zoom in a little bit tighter than that. Okay, so the travel for each of those locations might be different, but when we get that average, and we're able to tell our students at each of the different locations what the costs are, we're able to get these numbers and keep track of them. The only threat, again, is the euro, the dollar to euro exchange rate. So we always tell them you're gonna budget more anyways, because you do wanna go out in the evenings and enjoy some of these places, maybe enjoy some adult beverages at some of the sites that they've been to. So they allocate money for that. We do everything as a partner with the Global Education Office. So our idea is we've never touched money, but we give all the criteria of what they need to achieve and the target dates when they need to achieve those things. So anytime that they purchase things, they have to upload those to the Global Education Office once they apply. So that helps us keep track. We know which students are 100% complete or who still needs to purchase their airline tickets. They need to upload that information onto there. We never touch money. We never hear any complaints. The only thing I do is bend my dean's arm to cover our salaries. I think what we're doing here is really redefining how we teach engineering. And I think we're having a real impact here at UNM, and there's no reason that we can't do this. So I'm willing to help out anybody that wants to try to look at this as a possible option for your coursework. Or what lessons learned, you need a minimum of 2 courses. It's not worth the expense to fly all the way to Europe just for 1 3-credit hour, 2-week course. Some of the limitations that happen if you do those things is that it doesn't open you up to the scholarships. The students can apply for scholarships and gain them, especially if they're considered full-time. 6 credit hours is full-time in the summer. They get FAFSA money, they get scholarship opportunity money, and it really goes a long way in helping them afford to be able to do this.
I have one question for you, Michael. One thing that other groups have asked are, have you ever come across something where you say the student needs to have this amount of money, but what if they get there and they don't? Has that happened to you?
That has happened in a way that, and it's usually that student loses a credit card. You know, we always say, hey, you have 2. I have 3 actually that I take with me. I take my quote-unquote See You Anytime card because this works in Europe. And all the Plus and all these systems, they work. More importantly, I've got my quote-unquote check debit card. It's chipped, totally works, fine, no problem. And then I've got my, hey, quote-unquote, I need to spend $3,000 to buy this or that my wife wants, because she wanted the chandelier, and there's that's the whole point. Having funds and stuff like that, helping the students understand that they need to, have money, don't do the exchange rate there. These get you the best exchange rate when you actually purchase something. You don't have to deal with all these fees. If you convert money in Europe, they're hitting you 10% easily. You're losing that. So we teach our students how to do this. It becomes a life-changing experience for them. They are truly now global, students. And some of our students even now are studying abroad for programs.
If I might add, one of the things you need to keep in mind for your respective programs, depending on the payment habits in the particular country. One, there are a lot of countries where cash is still king, so credit cards are not accepted everywhere. If they are accepted, they will often have a minimum purchase requirement. So in Europe, for instance, if you want to charge €1.25, they said forget it. So your students also need to carry some cash for these smaller kinds of expenses.
Here's the deal: I withdraw 500 euros at a pop with my See You Anytime card. I don't pay that exchange, that conversion fee, but I have that money with me for that week, 500 euros. And that's what we teach our students, that if you take cash, you're gonna pay a premium to exchange it somewhere. versus if you withdraw it from an ATM.
Did you ever have like just a dinner for everybody that they paid, that you all paid for?
The opposite
Everyone
way.
had to pay
Not
separately?
the opposite way. When I was teaching in Italy, in Rome, I rented a really nice flat with a rooftop. We had dinner at my house, quote unquote. All the students came by. We made our own pasta. We did all those things, and as far as going out and purchasing a dinner, typically the last night people do that, but it's pay as you go. So it's, I don't have to do one bulk payment for anything. And I definitely don't like doing paperwork justifying expenditures.
So how do you pay for your faculty expenses when you're over there?
SAC provides funding. What is short between both of us, my department provides funding to catch that up. The dean provides salary money, quote unquote, so that's fixed. That money then goes into index. So our index is, I have my quote unquote staff members, they buy my airline ticket, make my hotel arrangements, they pay with that index. It's all covered, it's all justified, it's for the course. Nothing else is touched. When I come back, I do the nickel and diming, expenses and stuff like that. Totally, I get per diem. Reimbursed, any kind of expenditures like special stuff. It keeps my costs down. My colleague's the opposite. He pays for everything, he comes back, and then he charges that index and, based on him justifying what he's doing and where he's doing it at.
Alright, so there is a class in here in about 10 minutes. So this was great. What I do want to quickly sum up though is that there are a variety of ways to do this. These methods may or may not work for your particular program. Some of you are staff, not faculty. Some are just student groups. So remember that this depends on your country, but what has changed for sure is that departments should not be collecting cash check from students. So either there's the TouchNet, it's set up as a course fee like some of you do, or they pay at the bursar's office. So we just wanted to make sure that was clear at this event. Soon after this presentation in the next 2 weeks, we will upload this information, all the documents, create a nice little budget and payment page on the faculty leader page on the Study Abroad website, and we'll put all of that up so that way it's easy to access for people. But please provide feedback. This is the first round that we'll be using these, and the only way to make things better is to try them out, provide feedback, keep making the process better. So please feel free to contribute to that.